Israel reaches Sinai with full bellies, healed hearts, and no rule book yet. And this is really going to mess with our theology. So pay attention, because we've got some good things coming on what Exodus 16 through 19 are showing us. Now, these chapters that we're in, they really sit between the deliverance of the Red Sea and the law, the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai. Israel is newly free, newly fragile, and learning how to live as God's people in the wilderness, in freedom. So these chapters that we read cover manna and Sabbath and water from a rock and victory over Amalek and wise leadership through Jethro, and finally the dramatic arrival at Mount Sinai. These are not random stories or some type of a random travel journey or narrative. Rather, it's an intentional formation. Now hang with me, because I'm going to show you how this applies to our life today and why these chapters are so important. You see, the pattern that most people miss is that God forms a people before he instructs a people. He talks about identity before he talks about mission. Now watch this. Before showing you this repeated biblical pattern that we're going to see and why these stories matter, do me a favor, hit the like button. That will let YouTube know that there are people who like this and want to see more of this kind of content. So first of all, let's get into one of the patterns we see. God's grace comes first, obedience second. Exodus 16, God feeds the people before they trust him. Exodus 17, God gives them water from a rock after they complain. Exodus 19, God reminds them, I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself before giving them the Ten Commandments, or the commands. So we see this same pattern in the life of Abraham, which we talked about back in Genesis. Abraham is chosen before he obeys. We see David is anointed before he reigns as king. Jesus says, follow me, before he says, here's how to live. And then Ephesians, the first 3 chapters, talk about our identity, and then chapters 4 through 6 talk about instruction. So again, throughout Scripture, we see this pattern of God's grace first, his compassion, his love, his mercy, and then our obedience, our mission, our instruction on how to live. We see this in the provision, the testing, and the revelation. Now watch this. Man attests daily trust. In other words, do I trust God for each day to provide? Amalek tests our dependence on God rather than our own strength. God, you have to defeat this enemy. I can't do it in myself. Sinai reveals God's holiness and purpose. So there's the pattern: provision, testing, revelation. This is a training ground, not a waiting room. Some of us have been waiting maybe on God for some answer to something for a while. Rather than think of it as just waiting and what's going on, maybe look at it as, oh, God, you're training me for something. So what are you training me for, and how can I grow in this area? Watch this. God introduces Sabbath before Sinai. In other words, Sabbath appears in Exodus 16 before the Ten Commandments. Rest is not a reward for obedience. It's a gift to us. I see God's grace all over this. And sometimes people look at the Old Testament and go, man, God's so angry and he's wiping everybody out and he just doesn't like people. But we see this clearly is not the case just in these 3 chapters. And then Israel moves from slaves to sons. Exodus 19, you will be my treasured possession, a kingdom of priests. Why this matters today. We still try to live in Sinai without manna. Well, what does that mean? In other words, we want clarity before we trust. God, what are you doing before I'm going to say yes to you? We talked about this a lot in our last book, in the book of Job, as we traveled through it. You may want to go back and look at that. We want rules without the relationship. God, just tell me what I'm supposed to do. We want God's direction without daily dependence. Right? All these things. And so these chapters confront modern Christianity's biggest temptation, trying to earn from God what he only gives by grace. See, here's the order that is still in part today. Rescue, relationship, responsibility. So he rescued the Israelites, he developed a relationship with them, and then he said, okay, now here's your responsibility. Go into the promised land, here's what I want you to do. And God does the same in our lives today. See, if we skip the middle, if we skip relationship, then obedience becomes exhausting. We've got the rescue, right? We're saved from our sin. Now we go right into responsibility without any relationship. And it's like, oh, this is tiring. If we reverse the order, if we say responsibility first, in other words, if I try to be good enough to earn God's love and salvation and grace, well, then it's all based on performance, what I can do. And I'm never going to be good enough to do that. And if we miss the pattern completely, we miss the heart of God, His grace, relationship, and then, God, what can I do to serve? So here's where I want to wrap this up. God didn't bring Israel out of Egypt just to give them a bunch of rules to live by. And I think we think this sometimes. He brought them out of Egypt, put them to Mount Sinai. We skip all of this stuff in between. He brought them there to teach them how to live as free people in His presence. Remember when Moses goes to Pharaoh, the first thing he says is, we want to go out and we want to worship the Lord. That's why we want to leave Egypt, is to go to worship. It was all about intimacy, encounter, presence. It wasn't about rules. It wasn't about mission at this point. It was about relationship. And He's doing the same thing in your life and my life today. And really, does it matter? Does it really come to the place where we're understanding what He's doing and what He wants to do through us? Hey, if this has been helpful, and I hope it has, do me a favor, comment down there, or maybe you have a prayer request. Just place it down there. We will pray for you. And then like this and share it with a friend. We would greatly appreciate it.